Subject this morning is, can thought change matter? Thought can change matter, because the divine consciousness, as the mind, has produced all things. Our bodies all matter, and therefore it can control and change matter. Mind is the end of the river of God's consciousness. Mind is one with divine mind. The consciousness in our mind is one with the divine consciousness, as it flows from God the Father down through the successive stages into our body. It is the end of the river of God. Mind, as you know, has the three parts: waking mind, subconscious mind, and superconscious mind. Now, whatever pattern of thought is in that mind, if we reinforce it with divine will, with our soul's consciousness plus the power of God's will, that pattern will be materialized just like our bodies have been materialized. And so when the pattern changes, due to the power of God, so the matter, which is simply a materialization of the pattern, changes. And so we must keep the pattern right. Remember that. Keep the pattern in your mind right. Just as a simple illustration, you've seen some people, they never seem to change. They look the same. Why? Because the pattern is kept the same. Others change considerably. Under certain conditions, the pattern in the mind changes, and the life force flowing through that pattern changes the body or matter. Now let us discuss just for a moment about mind. Mind is that process of consciousness which gives meaning to the senses, without which our senses could not act. And then another definition of mind is that it coordinates the senses. Now, sometimes we have mind operating in an unorganized way. Then it is swayed by the senses, by passion, and by emotion. And on the other hand, we have the organized mind, which operates with a sort of reasoning, although it is not true reason. Rather, it operates from inference. But still, this mind is not sure. That's the thing we must remember, unless we reinforce it with soul consciousness and God's will. This directs the life force, and then mind operates in an organized way. We can take the illustration of a group of men, a gang of men working. They can work in an unorganized way, being governed by the whims of various members, or they can work in an organized way following one who is in charge of them. When they work that way, then we see the results. And so mind is like that. The main and principal function of mind is to coordinate the senses. But we can, by coupling, reinforcing the action of mind with the proper consciousness, especially God contact, then we can direct the life force to cause mind to work as we would like it, to have the pattern in the mind projected, materialized. So much for mind. Now let us discuss for a minute the structure of the mind. It has two component parts, principal parts: the mind stuff. You've heard of mind stuff. That's the fine material of God's consciousness, out of which the mind is manufactured. We have the mind stuff, known the Sanskrit word as chitta, chitta. Then we have another part of mind which we must pay strict attention to. And these are, so to speak, the waves in the mind. The waves in the mind stuff, called the Vitrittis. I'd rather spell these Sanskrit words than try to pronounce them. Vitris, I should say. These are the waves in the mind stuff. Now, what causes these waves? This is the important thing. They are caused by the pranic energy. The pranic energy, which is the life force, the great cosmic force of God in the body, they cause the movement in the mind stuff. Those are the things we have to watch. Those are the things we have to control, especially in meditation. We must still those waves. But still, the pattern in the mind stuff must be right. Then, as the life force directed by God in us, through God contact, flows through it, the pattern is materialized. Remember the two parts of mind. Mind stuff, fine material, out of which the mind is manufactured. Everything comes from God's consciousness, we know. But the mind stuff is that. But the power of the mind is in the movement of it. And the waves in the mind stuff, those waves are produced by the pranic energy, which is one with God's great cosmic energy. Now going on, just a minute. Remember, the power of the mind is in the pranic force. That's the important thing. That is what we must never forget. And therefore, our attitude of mind, so to speak, our consciousness that we use in directing the pranic energy determines whether the matter is changed or not, whether the pattern is materialized as we want it or not. And that's why St. Paul said, "Let the same mind be in you that was in Christ." You see, it is the divine mind of Christ's consciousness that was directing Jesus. And so if we are to change matter as we desire, we have to see that our mind is the same mind that was in Christ. Now going on as to how mind works to change matter. How mind works to change matter. I have practically told you, first, there is a pattern of thought. That's why they say thoughts are things. First, there is a pattern of thought. And then, the life force flows under the direction of will and your consciousness to materialize that pattern. Just like the movie, you have the film. The light can be likened to the pranic energy which projects through the film, producing the materialized thought. So that's how matter is changed. First, the pattern of thought is formed. Then, the pranic energy, or life force, flows through that, producing the change in matter. So, a strong mind is necessary. A strong mind is necessary to produce changes in matter. First, the thought pattern is formed. Then, the life force, guided by the soul consciousness in which is the divine will, that flows through the pattern, materializing that pattern and giving you your desired result. A strong mind is necessary. The strong mind is determined by your relationship with the power of God in you as pranic energy, plus keeping the pattern right. If the pattern is right, even though you have perhaps not the force of God behind you, the results will be right. But if you have the right pattern plus the power of God in you, then you cannot fail to change matter as you desire. A strong mind is absolutely necessary. We should have such a strong mind that we can overcome even poison. The power of mind, reinforced by God contact, can do anything. I remember the Master told one time of a saint in India, or I don't know as he was a saint, he was one who had mastered the mental phenomena and the laws of mind, that he could, by following certain laws, prepare his mind, unite his mind with the power of God, and he could drink poisons. And so we must have that strong mind, especially if we are going to change matter, which we can, and I'll try to point out in a minute that it can be done. If we are to change matter as we desire, we must have a strong mind. There's no better way than through God contact. When you feel His power behind you, and you keep the pattern right by keeping your consciousness one with God, you cannot fail. Of course, evil forces can change matter just the same, because they can control and do control the pranic force. But God contact is the greatest thing, stronger than all evil forces. Strong thought can materialize anything. Now I have a few illustrations of how a strong mind works. An organized mind. You know, blisters have been produced through the power of mind. Professor James points that out. Also, tumors and such things are produced by the power of mind. The evil force, if you want to call that, satanic force, directs the prana flowing through the thought pattern, which somehow is there. The pattern is not right. That produces the tumor by the power of mind, and by the same power that can be removed. Don't forget that. By the same power that can be removed. And so it is not always the God-guided force that projects or materializes the pattern. Sometimes it's that thing called the devil or Satan. But, nevertheless, the law is the same. And as that thing is produced, it can also be changed by the same law under the direction of God contact. Now I have another illustration. It's a personal illustration, but it shows definitely how matter can be changed, or how the effect produced on matter can be inhibited. It is a personal illustration. I hope you'll pardon me, but it was right close to me, and so I can tell it nicely, I hope. One time at Mount Washington, somehow these three fingers got caught. I won't say who closed the door. These three fingers were caught in the door jamb of a Cadillac, one of the older models, when they fitted nice and close. And these three fingers were just the shape, when I got them out of there, of that door jamb. Right flat. Right crushed like that. Well, of course, at first the pain was terrific. Then somehow Mrs. Lewis got hold of the Master. He was in the car. He'd just stepped out and gone inside the building. And from that moment on, I felt just as if there was a wall between my consciousness and the fingers. In other words, the pattern in the mind was shut off. That surely would have formed a beautiful pattern in my mind of injury. But that wall was there. I could feel it. By his power, the Master put that wall between the injury and the rest of my consciousness. And I would come down and I'd come through that wall and I soon went back because the pain was terrific. And so it was not only the physical pain but the mental pain. I felt sure that I would have to be hospitalized, and I was leaving next day for Boston. How could I do it? Everything was a mess as far as the pattern in my mind was concerned. But the Master controlled that pattern. And that night we even went to the Hollywood Bowl to some sort of a performance. The only thing I remember keeping the hand in the coat. I was afraid somebody would rub against it. But still, my mind kept away from it. The next morning, I came down to breakfast. I had the hand, of course I had it with me, I had it in here. The Master never said a word, he wouldn't look at it. I said, all right, suits me. Everything is fine as long as it stays that way. That night, we left for Boston. Still, that wall was there. In the morning, on the next day, we went to breakfast, and then I just kind of carefully peeked at it. They were there, perfect. Just two little blue marks on the back. So you see, that's a personal illustration. Almost instantaneous change of matter by the power of mind to prevent that pattern forming that would cause me much difficulty as well as pain, both physical and mental. And so there you have three illustrations of a strong mind and its possibility. Mind coupled with God's power and consciousness can do anything. It has produced our body, therefore it can change it. Now going on just a minute or two about the metaphysics of how mind changes matter. The body, as I have said, is produced by thought. And in the producing of the body, there are two kinds of cells that work. The germ cells, which are active, which follow and pattern as it should be. Now these germ cells become lazy after a while, and they change to somatic cells, or cells that are resting. And that's why the body changes. Ordinarily, the germ cells keep the body as it should be, in its normal state, according to the cycle of life. But many times you see that the body changes considerably. Why? Because the germ cells have laid down on the job. They've become somatic cells. And therefore, matter changes. Now, a strong mind can make those somatic cells again get active, become active as germ cells. Now, when this happens, then instead of prematurely growing old, we stay practically the same, gradually growing old gracefully. You've seen some people that are that way. They seem young all the time. Others seem old. Why? Because the pattern in the mind has changed, and the cells are not acting as they should. But a strong mind can absolutely make those cells pick up again and keep your body as it should be. One other thing, fear inhibits the action of the mind in changing matter. And of course that means in disease. Fear inhibits the action. Vyasa, a great saint of old, said years ago that fear inhibits the effect of mind on the disease. Now we have one or two illustrations of changes produced in matter by thought. I'll just quickly go over them. First, thought suggesting to the subconscious mind, according to Professor Hudson, produced 100 consecutive cures in cases of especially neurasthenia. That thought suggested to the subconscious mind, which is a part of the mind, caused those changes in matter. And so you can see thought can change matter by working through the subconscious mind. I have another illustration that comes to me. There was a cab driver who was one of my patients, and he had a condition that would not respond to treatment. I found that he was working 24 hours of the day practically, running that cab. And his thought pattern was not right. And as a result, his body would not respond. Matter changed. One day he came in smiling, and he was completely changed. He had sold the cab. And from that minute on, his whole body changed. He responded to treatment. And so you see, thought, as the thought pattern in the mind, can change matter. In this case, the body. One other illustration. One of the boys who graduated with us, a very brilliant boy. We had just graduated, and a few of us had set up our offices. He was the only child. He set up his office. Another of the boys had an office next door. In the morning of one day, that other boy came in, and he didn't hear any noise in this doctor's office, so he went in, and he found that he was lying on the floor. He had strapped on a gas machine, was experimenting, and it stayed on his head as he became unconscious, and he passed away. That night, the committee of us went to see his father and his mother. I had seen them before. And do you know that due to that severe change of thought, that I did not recognize those two people. They were not only changed in the expression, but the whole body was shriveled up. And so you see, thought can and does change matter. Thought stamps us either as gluttons, as worldly people, as criminals, as cultured individuals, or as children of God. Thought stamps us there. The glutton has the appearance of one. The criminal, you know he's a criminal. Cultured people have that appearance. Of course, there are different kinds of cultured people. Some are nice. We have some in Boston known as the Beacon Hill residents, and they are known as the snobs, and they look it. So there are different kinds of cultured people. But the thought does produce that condition in the body. And children of God, who are impregnated with His divine love and His protection and His power, they look as children of God. So thought can change matter without question. And so in conclusion, to change matter as we desire, we must keep thought right. We must keep the thought pattern right. And self-realization fellowship techniques, which give you God contact, can surely keep the pattern of thought right. There's nothing like that to keep the pattern right and also to give you the power to project that pattern as you want. Keep the pattern right by keeping in contact with God. With this one warning, nor be ye of doubtful mind. Do not doubt God. If you doubt God, the pattern is blemished. It is not as it should be. And so God contact, which you have right in your hand if you want it, can keep the pattern right. The pattern of thought must be right. And then, through His power and His grace, you can project that pattern to give you the desired result in matter.